pneumonia is the #1 cause of death in children, full stop. It's not that in the US, but the total number of kids that die is enormous, and most of those deaths in the developing world, and pneumonia is the #1 cause of those deaths. And so there's an overarching mission at the Gates Foundation that every person deserves the chance to live a healthy and productive life. So where's the problem? Well, the problem is in the developing world. I say that it's the #1 killer of kids under 5. And the geographies that have been highlighted here, unfortunately, contribute around 50% of all of those deaths. So just 6 countries. 3 in Asia, 3 in Africa. It's India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. And then Ethiopia, the DRC, and Nigeria in Africa. And these are countries that not only have a high burden of disease, but have an enormous number of children, and that's the reason that they contribute so much. So now I'm going to share with you some data generated right here in this institution, and in fact, they were only published online this week. So this is hot off the press, the CHIRG data, which look at the causes of death in kids. And here's the pneumonia part of the pie, which is 15%. So it remains the #1 cause of death in kids, but it is up there with preterm complications at 15%. The important aspect of this, which I'm going to talk about in the second half of my presentation, is this huge contribution of neonatal death. So this was under 40% the last time it was looked at a couple of years ago, and it's now 44% of all deaths are in neonates. Now, that's an extraordinary number because we're looking at deaths in the first 5 years of life. And the way I like to think about it is there's 60 months in the first 5 years of life. And this is telling you that 44% of all the deaths are in one of those months. And it happens to be the very first month. And in fact, a large fraction of these neonatal deaths are in the first day. So an awful lot of the mortality is very, very early. But the extraordinary interventions which I'm going to talk about, which have reduced pneumonia deaths, we believe, particularly vaccines, have had no impact on neonatal mortality. And so we are focused now on ways that we could reduce the neonatal deaths, but I'll talk about that in the second half of my talk. And so these are data generated by the CDC and looking at the burden of the vaccine types included in the 7-valent vaccine prior to the introduction of the vaccine in the year 2000. You see in the first year, the numbers dropped dramatically because the vaccine was introduced in January. So the total of cases by the end of the year was already down, and then it continued to drop, and it's essentially zero. I don't know if you can read the red that well, but that says 100% reduction in those vaccine types. Now, there's quite a lot of story to this, so I'm not going to go into detail about replacement and so on. But the reason that I wanted to show it as an introduction is that the impact of this vaccine on mortality is not only in children, it's in adults as well. And so to explain that, you have to say that does the vaccine impact pneumococcal disease in adults? And it does. So this is the same vaccine types that are in the pediatric vaccine, just the 7-valent types. And you'll see in adults, by 2007, they were down 92%. Hasn't been published, but by 2012, it's more than 99% reduction. But it's the introduction of the vaccine in South Africa. And this is not just the vaccine types. It's all types of pneumococci. So you see what you would hope to see in the kids, a reduction, which is going down. And this is 1 to 4 years of age. So the kids, the older kids now are getting the vaccine. It was originally introduced in 2009. But look at these older age groups that never got the vaccine, including this age group, which is the HIV-infected adults who get pneumococcal disease. So in most parts of the world, you get a U-shaped curve for pneumococcal disease. We don't have an awful burden of pneumococcal disease, interestingly enough, in the elderly, but it's about equivalent across everybody from age 25 up, and that's a reflection of HIV, but you see these reductions. So we're confident that there is herd protection also in Africa. So now I want to come to the second half of my talk, which is after celebrating these reductions in mortality, and this is another picture of infant mortality going down in the world, and there's the Millennium Development Goal. Here's the bad news, that although mortality has been reducing a little bit in neonates, it's nothing like the slope of the reduction in the older age group. So is it possible to introduce vaccines which could reduce mortality in neonates in that first month of life? And so we come to maternal immunization. And so the idea would be it's possible theoretically to immunize kids at birth, but they have to make an immune response. The immune system is very immature at birth. And the option to try and protect kids from mortality, because many of these deaths in the first day or two, is just not going to work to immunize the newborn baby. But you can immunize the mom. So what do we know about maternal immunization? So this is our strategy. There are 5 pathogens up here that we believe not only cause mortality in the first 3 or 4 months of life, but are amenable, we believe, to a vaccine. So in summary then, deaths are declining in children, and this is really good news. The burden of mortality in children, the total number of kids that die has dramatically reduced. It was around 20 million deaths, we believe, as recently as 1990, and that's now way down. Well, it's still a large number of deaths, between 6 and 7 million now. But pneumonia remains a major killer of both children and adults. Pneumococcal conjugate vaccine is rolled out in many developing countries where it is reducing mortality, and I showed you some of those data. Protection extends to young adults with HIV, these are the data from South Africa, and to the elderly through herd effects, and I showed you the US data on that. More than 40% of childhood deaths occur in neonates, the latest CHIRG data are 44%, and neonatal mortality has reduced to a lesser extent. Maternal immunization has the potential to reduce neonatal mortality and to increase the benefits offered to mothers as part of antenatal care, and so that'll be the focus of our attention in the next few years. So thank you for your attention.